This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 155 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's episode has this title, What's So Special About India? And it's deliberately slightly provocative because this is a question I have asked numerous people many times over the years, because I haven't been to India yet, but it's one of those destinations where people often come back kind of transformed and all evangelical about it and, saying that they want to go again and again and, you must go to India. And I have to say that as a result of actually recording some conversations about this very question for the podcast, I have been more than convinced. I think I was pretty close to convinced already, but my three guests today have convinced me. So I guess as a listener today, you might be on one of two sides of the fence, or perhaps three. A three-sided fence, weird. Anyway, perhaps you are already a complete India convert, like my guests today. Perhaps you have been and don't want to return, and I do find there's a few people who fit into that camp. Or like me, you sort of have seen a lot of hype about what an amazing destination India is, and maybe you're not sure whether it's for you. So I guess whichever side of this funny three-sided fence you sit on, I hope you'll get something out of today's episode. I have certainly had my eyes opened time and time again in the last few years about India, and I'm sure I will get there one day. The closest I've got actually is a nice little story. Is last month, I think it was, I've done some work together with Seng Mah from Hands On Journeys, who's been a podcast sponsor in the past. And Seng Mah was in India again. And in true Seng Mah style, she had another big idea. And she'd been invited to speak at an event as part of New York Fashion Week, and decided to go back to Delhi, to the slums where she's been working with a group of women for some years, get them to design some awesome clothes and take those clothes to New York Fashion Week to be on a catwalk there. And not as if that's not enough, she decided to make a short feature film about the whole event as well. Anyway, I found myself one day a month or two back on a Skype call into the slums of Delhi, getting to meet these women, over Skype, which is, the second best thing. It would have been amazing to be there, but second best thing, and get to talk to them about about what this project has meant to them, and they showed me the clothes they'd been making, and it was a pretty cool experience to be on Skype at least into this slum in Delhi and to get to know these people and this project. So that's the closest I have been to India so far. I've been seen there and I've looked into their room, but one day I will get there for sure, I think. Now, my first guest today is Seng Mah, and he has been to India multiple times now, and we've chatted about this very topic, what's so special about India. And so although I have never felt particularly drawn to it, I wanted to know more about what Seng thought. Now, you might remember back in episode 133, it was the episode called The Big Trips That Changed Everything. And in that episode, I talked with Seng about his very first trip to India and how life-changing it was, truly life-changing. He came home and quit his job, basically. So that's well worth a listen. Go back to episode 133. But then I asked Seng to tell me some more about why people get so into India.
The thing I find, I think why people praise India, it's not so much of it as a destination, but as the impact that India has on them as a person. As I said, my experiences there in 4 weeks changed the way I wanted to lead the rest of my life. And I think what people are actually saying when they say that they love India, they had amazing experiences there and they come back and they want to go back again, is the fact that they acknowledge that there is this very positive transformative power that travel in India has on you. And like for me personally, I want to go back there again and again because I know it will be able to change me for the better this way and that way each time I visit. I'll have incredibly positive experiences with people there. I'll have incredibly positive experiences from a photographic point of view, and that energizes me. That makes me feel excited about what I do. Makes me excited about who I am and what I want to be. And I think that's what people are saying when they come back. It's not an easy country to travel through, and I think sometimes the challenges can be a positive thing simply because it helps you let go. We live in in Australia, we live in a society that, is quite regimented, and you can depend on things happening simply because the government have set up structures and safety nets for you.
Yeah.
So if something doesn't work, if the train's not running, there'll be a shuttle bus, for instance, or you'll be informed far in advance through a whole range of different channels that the train's not running, so please make alternative arrangements, things like that we take for granted, and we manage our lives around it very easily, whereas those things don't exist in India. Trains can be late, trains may be cancelled, so you almost have to rely on yourself and tap into a part of your own kind of resourcefulness to be able to move on. One of the interesting experiences I've had the first time there was we flew back to India from Kathmandu. We landed in Varanasi because we had to take a connecting flight from Varanasi to Delhi. We landed in Varanasi and missed our connecting flight simply because of the timing of it. And so we were stuck at Varanasi airport. And there were no taxis running because basically all the tourists had disembarked and taken the taxis, and basically the airport was close to empty. And we then had to book a flight the next day and try to basically work out what we're going to do for the night. We're going to find accommodation for the night. So it's a challenge. And if you're not, if you don't have the ability to calm down and say, look, this is what's happened, let's just roll with it and see what we can do to make the best out of this particular scenario, because there's no one else who will actually help you. So you have no choice but to actually do that. You've got to basically sit down and say, this is the situation, so what can I do next? How do I get accommodation for the night? How do I come back again to the airport to get my connecting flight? So it just teaches you to stop panicking. It teaches you to stop stressing, because we stress out about a lot of minor things in life and things like that. And it just stops you from doing that, because you work around it. You work around the things that happen. This is the worst thing that can happen. Well, what can I do to actually get past that? What can I do to actually progress and to move on? And I think the sorts of challenges that most people might find stressful in India in that context can also be very rewarding, in the sense that it actually helps you kind of tap into resources that you probably were not aware that you had, because you've kind of led a fairly comfortable life in a modern westernized country. So I think that's probably what the appeal of India is in that respect there. It's a funny one, because I've met people similar as you said. They've got no desire to go to India. They'll say things like, I can't imagine a worse place in the world to go. And I guess they're probably operating from a set of stereotype views about, India in that respect. Whereas if they actually went and experienced it, especially at the coalface, I think they'd be remarkably surprised by what they find there, and they'd be remarkably surprised by what India can teach them about themselves and their capacity for growth and their capacity for resourcefulness.
It almost sounds as though kind of the sorts of things that travel anywhere teaches you are magnified in India. And
yes, I think that's pretty much it. I think you've said that really well.
So you're going to come back changed no matter what. Whereas on some trips, you might learn a thing or two, but in India, you have no doubt about it. You will come back changed.
Yeah, in some respects, and it's a funny thing to say, but having had the India travel experience has spoiled a lot of the European travel experiences for me. I mean, as I said before, one of my first trips was to spend 3 months traveling around Europe, and that was mind-blowing, because there was all that history and all that culture and art and things which are so different there to Australia, for example. But then ever since, I've kind of been back to India several times. Every time I go back to Europe, and it could be some place really interesting, like even Sardinia, which is a little bit off the beaten path, for example. But when you're in an old town, you're walking up and down the streets, and you don't see that much. It's just old buildings, a mountain here and there, and things like that. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel as textured. It doesn't feel as rich as in India because of the intensity of the experiences that you actually get there. And I think that's what I find very interesting about India. I was actually speaking to one of the guests from the recent tour last night, and he said that when he first came back to Australia, he couldn't imagine going back. But after about 10 days, he wanted to go back. I think what you do is when you come back from India, you're so exhausted because it takes so much out of you. And you just can't imagine going back because of the intensity of your experiences. But then once you get over that in about a week, once you settle into it, you begin to hanker for those sorts of experiences that you felt so connected to when you were there. And I felt the same about a week or so after I got back. I began to, in my head, start to make plans to try and get back there
again.
At the end of the year, again, just because I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that and I wanted to meet these people again and I wanted to photograph this. And it was a very strong compulsion. Obviously, it probably won't happen this year because of a number of different other tours that I'm running. But it's that drive where you feel the need to actually go back. And a number of people who did the tour with me this year have expressed a very similar feeling that they were glad that they're back home, but at the same time they wanted to be back there again. So it leaves that indelible mark on you, and it always makes you want to go back there for some reason. Because I think you'll find, I think we want to go back there because we want the experience to show us more of ourselves and to actually get new experiences that we can get in India.
It's not about going to see the sights at all. And that's why you can keep going back, because it doesn't matter.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I think you're absolutely right in that sense there. It's about going back there and getting back into meeting people and having those experiences that you can never have pretty much elsewhere in the world, really.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you have explained that to me better than anybody ever has. So, I kind of see it as an inevitability that I'll get to India someday, because I've heard too much to not want to try, even though it doesn't draw me. And I'm sure that once I come back, I will be converted. I feel pretty confident about that, especially after this chat, because, you've explained that beautifully. I get it now. Yeah.
I'm glad.
So if you know me even a little bit, you won't be surprised to hear that just hearing this from Seng is enough to convince me I have to go to India. The fact that it's such a transformative experience and that really it's all about learning from your trip, then of course I want to go there. But I've got two more guests to chat to as well. Excuse me, my voice is at the end of a long week of talking. I've got two more voices to hear. This is true, two more guests. And first up is Whitney Taylor. Now, back in episode 129 on travel in developing countries, I have talked with Whitney about some of her experiences in India too. But I wanted to ask her more. And I did ask her, had she felt drawn to India before she went? And she was explaining to me that she only ended up there after crossing paths with Seng Mah, actually, from Hands On Journeys through her work. And that's how she ended up there, not with a particular intention, but the enthusiasm once she got there is clear.
It was never something I intended to do. Funny fact was I actually had a really close friend of mine travel throughout India backpacking by himself for 6 months. And then also two of my best girlfriends travel for 3 months throughout India by themselves. And I did it for, 12 days. And I was like, how on earth did you do India backpacking for that long? Like, it was an experience. But, oh my gosh, the country is so hot. Like, Fiji's hot. India is boiling, and the culture, you as a female, you have to cover up. You've got to cover, you've got to wear a scarf, you've got to put it over your head at times, you've got to wear sleeves, and sometimes you have to wear pants, and oh man, it's hot. So India is definitely not, it was not one on my bucket list, but after being to it, I would go back in a heartbeat.
Interesting. That was my next question.
Oh, yeah. So, like Nepal, different areas, Rishikesh, like there's so many areas inside India, Sri Lanka, everywhere that I would love to see. And I mean, I only did the Golden Triangle.
There's so much more, yeah. But that's what I've always told, because I always say, I don't really feel drawn to India, but everyone I know who's been says, it doesn't matter. Just go. Once you've been, you will always want to go back. So it's we'll have to try one day just so I can figure it out for myself. It seems quite unique.
Right. It is unique, and the place is stunning, and the people are really humble and they're really welcoming, and they all smile to you and they all say namaste, namaste, and they're really happy for you to be there. And the history behind it. I love architecture and I love design and I love history, and like the Taj Mahal was mind-blowing. Just the sheer construction of the marble and how everything goes together, and all the different forts, that the Amber Fort and all these beautiful mosques and everything that they've made. They've poured a lot of energy into building these incredible temples. There was actually one temple we went to that you were not allowed to take your handbag into, a phone, your camera, nothing. You had to take your shoes off. So it was the most beautiful experience I've ever had with a monument, and I was not able to take any physical photo.
How frustrating.
I love photography, and I always say, if you travel anywhere, like, put your phone away if you've got a camera, like take photos, because they are everlasting memories. They're something that, captures that moment in time that you can go back to. And this place, it was just like, this is the sun was setting, and it was making this beautiful, beautiful light across the marble. And on the inside of this temple, everything was painted with gold. Like they love doing gold. Oh, man.
And all you can do is now imagine it in your mind again. You've got nothing to show someone, no pictures. I
cannot explain it to anyone how amazing this place was.
Oh, no.
It's beautiful light show, better than anything that I saw at Vivid in Sydney.
Yeah.
They did this beautiful like water and light show and a big Indian, like a big kind of show. Even all these monks came in. It was amazing. These monks dressed in with their orange cloak, sat down to watch this massive performance, and it was the story of the gods and how they fought about the land, and it was the most stunning visuals I've ever seen, and lighting show. It's like, how can I tell people about this? They're not going to believe me. They'll be like, oh no, it was India, there's no way it could be better than Vivid.
And yet it was. That's amazing. But it's almost an interesting way to experience it then, without having to just rely on your memory, is quite a special way. India sounds really incredible. I keep hearing this, and I guess I will have to go and try it out for myself sometime. I think Whitney's reactions to India and the desire to return again are pretty common amongst travellers who have made it to India. Now, my final guest today is Marilyn Murphy from Wow Travel Club, and this story she tells me does happen in India. It probably could happen elsewhere too. It's not specifically India that has made this story true, but I think it probably had more impact because it happened to her in India. Now, it starts off with Marilyn being on quite a long wander around the world in younger years, including an extended stay in India.
I was standing on a street corner in India. This is probably 7 months into my travel adventure. And by that time, I was living like a local practically. I was standing, I don't even remember where I was, but some temple or tourist attraction somewhere, and standing on a corner with a bunch of local beggars and people around me. They weren't bothering me a bit because they knew I had very little more than they did. And a tour bus pulled up, and these tourists got off the bus, the air-conditioned bus, obviously, because they were all very comfortable. I was standing there sweating in my cotton frock and flip-flops, and they had cameras around their neck, and they obviously were, very well off compared to me. And I just looked at them and I thought two things. I thought, well, very indignantly and righteously, that they were not getting a very authentic travel experience like I was. And secondly, they were, of course, old people. They were probably in their 50s or something. And I thought, I wonder if I'll ever be that old, and I wonder if I'll ever come back to India. And if I do, will I come back like that in an air-conditioned bus and staying in a nice hotel with elevators and room service. And, in the back of my mind, I knew that, yes, it was inevitable I was going to get older, but I wasn't sure about ever coming back to India and what that would be like. And when I then did return to India, probably 30 years later, maybe 25 years later, with an incentive group, and doing it in a very upscale way, as incentive groups and corporate groups always do, staying in the most beautiful hotels and having the most spectacular experiences in a relatively short time frame. We didn't have 2 months in India as I had. We had maybe 10 days, maybe even probably less than 10 days. But I remember one day, the first or second day in Delhi, as lovely and gorgeous as was the hotel, I had to get out. I had to, experience the real India again. So I ventured out of the palace gates, if you will, and just went and stood on a sidewalk and watched the traffic and the crowds and the cows and the bicycles and everything, rumbling by. And there was a rickshaw driver or a bicycle, one of those guys pull the tourists around, and he was, waiting across the street for somebody to come out and need a ride. So he came across the street and approached me and wanted to know if I needed a tour guide, whatever. His English was spotty. He had some sort of a disease that his face was all mottled and speckled, and he was, a little horrid looking, but he had the greatest smile. And I just thought, this is India. This is the third world. This is the developing world. And that's what I love about those kinds of countries. The people are just like us. They look different. They talk different. They eat different stuff. They wear weird clothes. But at heart, we're all the same. And those are the moments that I always treasure the most, is just the connections. And they're usually in those tiny little infinite moments, when you're off the beaten track, when you don't expect it, when you didn't try to manipulate anything, you just make a connection, and it's usually with a smile and just that face-to-face contact. I could tell 100 stories like that one, but the India one is pretty special.
Yes, I completely agree wholeheartedly with Marilyn that the connections and the people you meet when you travel, and how the lesson that we get from that is that we're all so much the same. You've probably heard me say it before, but it's so important, so I'll say it again. It's one of the main reasons I travel. And it also intrigues me that this situation happened to Marilyn in India. It seems more likely to happen there than probably anywhere else in the world, as it turns out, and if you believe all three guests of mine today, which I of course do. So there you go. That is the episode on what's so special about India. Seems that quite a lot is very special about India. But I would love to know what you think. Either you're a convert who's been and loved it, a convert who is ready to go, or maybe someone who didn't love it. I'd love to hear from all of you. Best way to tell me what your thoughts were is hop over to our Facebook group. It's called Thoughtful Travellers. If you haven't joined already, just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook, or look up the link in the show notes. For this episode, the show notes are at notaballerina.com/155. Now, a very big thank you to my India-loving guests today. I started off speaking with Seng Mah from Venture Photography, and you can find his info and some of the tours he runs to India, among other places, at venturephotography.com.au. Next, I chatted with Whitney, and the best place to find Whitney is on Instagram. She does all sorts of amazingly creative, cool stuff there, and she's Whitney Lee Artist on Instagram. And last but definitely not least, I chatted with Marilyn Murphy from the WOW Travel Club. I've got had a long chat with Marilyn and Gabriel from the WOW Travel Club, and lots more to share with them from them in coming episodes. And you can find that at wowtravelclub.com. So please hop over to Facebook and tell me about your impressions of India. I look forward to chatting about them. Thank you again very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.